Hey, what is up guys? It's Stan here back with another video. So Apple just finished the One More Thing Apple Keynote event that was held earlier today. It's basically the announcement of the Apple Silicon Macs, and Apple actually released quite a few Macs. So let's talk about all of the things that Apple released today. So if you're in the market for an Apple Mac, then this is very exciting for you guys because Apple just announced the M1 chip. This is basically the Apple Silicon CPU, GPU, all combined in one chip that we were waiting for. It's basically an 8-core CPU with an 8-core or up to 8-core GPU all on that chip. And the CPU, even though it's an 8-core CPU, it's actually 4 cores of performance cores as well as 4 high efficiency cores. The reason they do this is because not all applications need high performance. Sometimes they just churn away in the background and you get to save battery life using the 4 efficiency cores rather than the 4 high performance cores. This is kind of the best of both worlds. So what's unique about this chip is it's built on the TSMC's 5nm process. So currently Intel is on 14 nanometers. They're stuck on 14 nanometers. TSMC has been manufacturing 7 nanometers with the Ryzen chips, the AMD chips. So 14 nanometers on Intel is kind of similar to 7 nanometers on TSMC. However, this is going to be 5 nanometers. So this is one generation ahead of both Intel and AMD. So this is going to be basically world-class, best-in-class performance and energy saving across the board. So basically the performance that you can expect is twice the performance of Intel chip or a AMD chip at 10 watts, as well as or about a quarter of the energy at consumption at full performance. So it's kind of different ways of looking at performance per watt. So that kind of just gives you an idea of where this chip is going to be in terms of the competition. On the GPU side here, it's going to be a very similar story. So at 10 watts, you got twice the performance, and at max performance, it's about 1/3 of the power consumption. So we're talking about very, very efficient, very powerful chips. To put it into perspective here, Apple is saying that these laptops with the M1 chip is basically going to be, and quoting them, 98% faster than all PC laptops sold in the last year, or basically 2020. So it's going to be quick, and that's a good thing. Basically, it's going to be good for both web browsing as well as actual productivity. So web browsing, you're going to get a lot of battery life out of these chips, as well as the high performance stuff such as Photoshop or video editing with Final Cut. So the examples that they give is basically you're able to edit 4K video without multiple streams of 4K video without dropping any frames, as well as another example is 8K video ProRes with DaVinci Resolve. So we're talking about 13-inch MacBooks and MacBook Airs, or MacBook Pros and Airs, being able to do these heavy productivity things, and that's pretty amazing. So one last thing to note is that the memory is actually built onto the chip. I thought that was kind of interesting because this is completely radically new design. It's going to be very similar to actually what they have in the iPhones and iPads, which isn't a surprise, but rather than actual sticks of memory soldered onto the motherboard, it's going to be in the actual chip. So now it's kind of like you buy the chip or buy the laptop, there is absolutely no upgrading at all because it's all on the chip. So let's talk about the actual computers that were announced. You got the MacBook Air, which comes in the 8-core, 8-core CPU, 7 or 8-core GPU versions. And the numbers that they give, of course, these are Apple numbers. We'll have to see them independently, get them independently tested, but 3 times faster than other laptops in its class. So kind of like the 10, 15 watt power envelope type of laptop. So 3 times faster than those. 3.5 times faster CPU than past generations MacBook Air, 5 times faster in graphics, 2 times faster in SSD. So basically, I mean, we're talking about 100, 200, 300 times faster than previous generations. So this is a pretty big generational leap.
The Air is a fanless design because the chip itself, the graphics, the integrated graphics, and the CPU are both under 15 watts, or the whole package is under 15 watts, so you really don't need any fans for that. It's kind of like the iPad Pros, right? They might get a little bit warm to the touch, but with such a big laptop, 13-inch laptop, you're really not gonna have an issue with that. For battery, you've got 15 hours of web browsing battery and 18 hours of live or video playback battery. So this is kind of like iPad battery life. And you know, it's actually kind of to be expected because it's essentially an iPad with a keyboard cranked up to 11, right? In terms of performance. So this is pretty awesome. In terms of connectivity, this is actually something that many people may have missed, is that it's got Wi-Fi 6 as well as Thunderbolt and USB 4. So the new version of Thunderbolt and USB 4, it's kind of going to be merged together so that you're going to get the 40 gigabits of performance, best of both worlds. You got 2 ports on the MacBook Air. 2 ports. Yes, 2 ports. You can configure up from 8 gigs or 16 gigs of memory. Again, whatever you choose is going to be stuck for the life of the PC or the laptop. So choose wisely, and you can get up to 2 terabytes of storage, so a plenty amount of storage. And it starts at just $999. So it's not cheap, but it's certainly a lot of performance for just $1,000. Now, the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, we didn't get a redesign of the MacBook Pro in terms of form factor. It's going to be very similar to the current existing MacBook Pro. And in fact, the Air and the Pro are almost identical in dimensions and form factor. But the MacBook Pro is the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU. It's still the M1 chip, so performance, basically everything we said for the Air, it's gonna be basically the same for the MacBook Pro. Maybe ever so slightly faster just because it's got a higher TDP limit because it does have the fan. With the fan, they can clock it just a little bit higher, but the silicon, the chip itself is gonna be identical. And maybe just a little bit better. I don't know what they're doing on the integration side, so you know, maybe it's a little bit better, but basically it's the same chip. The difference is, however, you know, you got a little bit better microphone on the Pro. 13-inch Pro, they say it's gonna be the studio quality mic. It's probably gonna be very similar to what you get on the 16-inch MacBook Pros. Another difference is the screen. You've got they're both 13-inch screens, the Air and the Pro, but the Pro has a 500 nit brightness screen. The screen on the Air is gonna be 400 nits. I don't know if the screens are physically different or if they're just limiting the brightness. Most likely they're probably a little bit different, a little bit more expensive screen on the Pros. You do get a touch bar. You don't get one on the Air, so the Pros come in at $1299 starting price, so about $300 more than the Air. If you're looking to save money, get the Air, 13-inch Air. You'll be plenty happy, it's plenty fast. If you want to get just a little bit more stuff, features, that's where the Pro comes in. Mac Mini, there's not much to say about that. It's essentially identical to the MacBook Pros. M1 chip, it starts at $699. Basically everything that it applies for the I/O and everything about the MacBook Pros 13-inch can be translated to the Mac Mini, so that's pretty nice. One thing to note though, you don't get the 10 gigabit Ethernet option, upgradable option with the Apple Silicon. It's just not part of the I/O. You still have to buy the Intel version. There is still an Intel version, an i5 Intel version selling for like $1099, a little bit more expensive than the Apple Silicon version. You can get the 10 gigabit Ethernet, but it is an i5, 6-core i5. There's really no point. Get the Apple Silicon Mac Mini if you're looking for a Mac Mini. So what wasn't announced in this keynote? They did not talk about the 16-inch MacBook Pro. They did not talk about the iMac. So what we're expecting, or what I'm expecting, is early 2021, quarter one, maybe end of quarter one. They're probably going to be talking about releasing the new iMacs and the 16-inch MacBook Pros. What's special about that, or what excites me the most about that, is these laptops right here, they're designed for a lot more power consumption. So the Airs and the smaller inch MacBook Pros, the 13-inch versions, basically is designed for like 15, 20 watts. Now the M1 chip only comes in at 15 watts, but with a larger 16-inch MacBook Pro, you can have up to 45 watts of power consumption. And if you double the performance of the M1, M1X, whatever you want to call it, right? The second generation or the next generation of the Apple Silicon chip that consumes up to 30, 40 watts, double the performance. It's crazy. It'll be crazy good for video editing, crazy good for productivity. And with the size of these 16-inch MacBook Pros, the battery life on these are gonna be like 24-hour battery life. So you'll never have to plug in, you know? It's just like, you go to bed, you plug it in, and that's it, and then you're good for the next 2 days. It'll be insane. So there's, you know, I'm super excited about that for 2021. And then maybe we'll just get a replacement for the Mac Pro, or something that lives aside on the side, lives with the Mac Pro, maybe a Mac Pro Mini. I would certainly like to see something like that, or like a Mac Mini Pro, right? Mac Pro Mini, Mac Mini Pro, something that slots in between the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro. The performance is there. You just need to cram more silicon into the Apple Silicon and just crank it up to 11, and you get an amazing amount of performance in Apple Silicon. So in the end, overall today was a very exciting day. We got lots of good products. I actually purchased a 13-inch MacBook Air to replace my wife's 13-inch 2018 MacBook Air. Really didn't need to do that, but I really wanted to get one on my hands on one. So I'm gonna be playing around with that, and I'll show you guys all about that. So stay tuned. If you wanna see that, make sure to subscribe and make sure to hit that like button on your way out. Anyway, it's Stan. I'll see you guys in the next one.